Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2:30 on November 26, 2018, and we're convening the Board of Canvassers first. We have a quorum present, and we will begin with the Board of Canvassers meeting. And Margaret, we're here to certify the 2018 general gubernatorial election.
Yes.
So the floor is yours.
Okay, so the voter registration system operations submitted monthly audits as required to the State Board of Elections. The voting system overview, the logic and accuracy testing was completed on November 5th. Voting unit and poll book allocation was approved by the State Board on September 20th. On-time opening, all early voting centers on Election Day opened on time. The voting system verification, the 100% verification of the election night tabulation and early voting occurred November 7th through the 9th. The clear ballot audit was submitted on November 12th, containing the early voting on Election Day numbers, and again submitted on November 19th after the 3 canvasses. The clear ballot audit will be explained by Allison, the Deputy Director. Polling place operation, election judge training commenced on August 29, finished on Saturday, November 3rd. Training materials issued by the State Board of Elections, as well as job guides, learning video, and online training tools developed for Montgomery County were used for election judge training. Polling place evaluations were conducted at early voting centers in the polling places. The evaluations will be submitted by January 7th, and a report will be prepared by the February board meeting. All early voting centers and polling place met accessibility requirements of by the State Board of Elections regulations. Ballot accountability forms were completed and will be forwarded to the State Board on December 6th.
Can you tell us what those are?
It's a form that the election judges fill out. On time opening, canvas audit, absentee audit completed and submitted, provisional audit completed and submitted, precinct audit completed and submitted, clear ballot.
For clear ballot, this is the document that the state bases this is their audit threshold report, which as long as we don't have clear ballot, see any results in the ovals that are more than 0.5% off of what ES&S sees, then we're green light to move forward. And so I have just handed a copy of this around. It is not yet on the State Board of Elections website, but it will be. We do not have the complete clear ballot results. This is for Election Day and early voting. The provisional and absentee comparison is not done yet for Baltimore County, for Prince George's County, or for Montgomery County, but the State Board personnel say not to worry. That is something that is to be done before the State Board certifies. And so we have the partial data. We don't have all of it yet, but they said that is to be expected, and the State Board will certify assuming that nothing changes in what clear ballot sees.
What's the date of their certification?
I think it's December 5th.
I think it's
yes.
December 10th.
No, it's December 5th.
Is it? Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So what is the sum of vote differences column? What does that tell you?
When clear ballot software looks at the ballot images and interprets the ovals, the situations where they saw something different than ES&S saw.
ES&S being how their software in the scanner counted the oval.
Same as your eyeballs or somebody else's eyeballs at the table would interpret the ovals potentially differently. Their software interpreted the ovals differently, and each one, whether they saw a vote that ES&S's software did not see, or whether they did not see a vote that ES&S's software saw, each one of those counts as a discrepancy.
So like in that first column, each one of those would be part of the 52 for governor and lieutenant governor?
I didn't actually keep a copy of it for myself, but yes. Yes, so the sum of the vote differences, so they might have had 25 situations where their software saw an oval and the other didn't, and then they might have 27 situations where the opposite was true. So it's the sum of both of them, the positive and the negative.
And is there, I guess, well, probably particularly not in this situation, but would there ever be a situation where you'd have to decide, well, which one is correct?
No,
No.
that's why we have recounts. You get to do that.
Yeah.
Would this have resulted in those 52 ballots, for example, being pulled for us to look at?
If they were canvassed in the same way that we canvass absentee and provisional ballots,
Or if there was a recount?
right?
No.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
Maybe.
it was sort of used in connection with the recounts for the primaries because the candidates used the clear ballot audit to go ahead and see where there was a potential where it could have been misread or read a different way. And a lot of those, the lawyers were looking at and specifically asking what the board's decision was with regard to those ballots.
Do we have any indication as to, during that recount, whether we ended up more often with one version or another?
No, we've not had time to do that type of investigation, nor will we have time. We have plenty to do.
Allison, any idea why the judges were off 3,500?
Yes. The write-ins were, here, they have language actually on the state board website that, where they have a link that is not live yet for the Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Baltimore County results. It says there is a known issue with write-in votes in contests where the vote for is greater than 1. The number of write-in votes is incomplete in the audit system because only the first write-in line was tabulated, and therefore a negative discrepancy is being reported.
Somebody
There's another-
would fill in the write-in but wouldn't put a name in.
When Clear Ballot looked at the write-ins, they only looked at the first write-in. They did not look at the additional write-ins, is the way that I understand, is the way that I interpret that text.
Do we know why they did it that way?
No. I think they're just still figuring out their processes, and we didn't have write-in votes in the primary for them to
Right.
need
just
to
seems
have
like
their
an
software read.
It seems like it overstates the difference, probably substantially, if they're only measuring in one place.
There is another report that we can use. It's a very long report, but there's another report that we can use where it adds up the number of write-ins for the contest, and we can compare the two numbers and sort of come at that from a different direction. But the way that the logic of their report worked, it didn't accurately see that in this report, but it's still within the margin.
Also,
Within the half of a
but
percent margin.
for delegates, you choose up to 3.
Right.
Could these numbers, 100 and some odd, be the people were overvoting or undervoting or what?
My understanding is that it's the write-in issue. In each of those cases, it's where the number that you vote for is more than 1, where the write-ins are not showing in that report consistently.
So Allison, you need a 0.5% to trigger an examination, and none of these races are 0.5, is that correct?
Correct.
And the overall audit is 0.056%?
Correct.
So how does Clear Ballot work? Do they get the ballot images and it's
Yes.
fed into their system?
Correct.
When we do the 100% verification, there's a separate memory drive that is collecting that data, and as soon as we complete the 100% verification, then we send that drive to Clear Ballot, and once the 3 canvasses, the 2 absentees and the 1 provisional, were completed, that second drive was sent to Clear Ballot.
So we send them the physical drive, or do we actually upload it to?
I think it's a separate drive, isn't it?
You have to download it from our system to a standalone hard drive that the state sends us.
And then that hard
We
drive
email
is
it back.
physically delivered to clear.
Yeah, we have to send it to clear ballot.
Okay. All right, wait times. Since 2016 and the Presidential Commission on Wait Times, we've been trying to monitor wait times in the precincts with uneven success. But of the 222 locations that we have as a polling place, 200 precincts did complete a full or partial documentation. And this is truly just first glance, skimming the top. The staff really needs to do a deeper dive into this. I've had the opportunity to talk with Eric and Allison on this, but basically the vast majority of our precincts still, our peak voting time remains at 7 a.m. The average number in line at the peak period was 37 persons, and wait time at the peak was 18 minutes. Now, I know we all heard other things, and that's how come I, as well as Allison, believe that we need to go through this data a lot deeper because we saw, precincts that had, 11 voters at 7 a.m. and other precincts that had 140. So it's almost like there's two different worlds of voting going on out there. So we hope to have you provide you in the next 60 days a better analysis of what we're seeing at the polling places. Then election result reporting. Basically, 8 o'clock, the early voting results were posted as required. And then at 8:08, I received an email from the state telling me to remove the early voting results, and everything was embargoed until they contacted me. I was contacted at about 9:20, and I got downstairs and we started posting. So basically, this gives you the breakout by precinct, and then the percentages counted at 10:54, which is for the top of the hour. News media, we were at 93.31%. Before the media went off the air, we were at 98.51%. And at 11:42, we had 100% of our precincts reporting. I need two different motions. One, I need a motion to accept the 2 late absentees.
To be rejected.
To reject, yes.
To reject the
To reject.
absentees that are untimely,
And
which are
they've been
behind
reviewed
you.
by staff?
Yes. I'll move.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed?
Okay, and the second item I need is a motion to direct the chair and secretary to sign certification documents and transmit to the State Board of Elections, the clerk of the circuit court, and clerk of the council. I move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
No one
Okay.
opposed? We also have a cover letter to be signed by every member of the board.
Yes. Okay.
And pass this around.
Do we, okay, so we have both motions passed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'd like is to take a 5-minute recess to get these signatures.
We're going to
Mr.
download them
President,
now.
I move that we go into recess for 5 minutes.
All agreed?
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Naheed?
thought there was a motion.
Naheed seconded.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's pass this around. But
Yeah. I move we adjourn
Just a second, sorry.
I just want to say,
Go ahead, sorry.
wait, before Naheed's motion to adjourn, I know we all feel the same way, to express our gratitude to Margaret and the staff and the board, but I've never seen such dedication and hard work. Margaret and the staff were here every day, almost all night on occasion. So I know we all thank you very much for all your dedication and hard work.
Thank you.
I second it.
So is there a motion to adjourn the board of canvassers?
I move we adjourn the Board of Canvassers.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now we're going to, it's 2:48 approximately on November 26, 2018, and we're now going to convene a meeting of the Board of Elections for Montgomery County. We have a quorum present, And we're going to begin with approval of minutes from October 15th, 2018.
I move we accept the minute as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Hold on. Okay, those in favor,
All those,
aye.
any opposed?
No.
Okay, so it's, we got that. Okay, now we're going to go to the November 6th, 2018 board meeting.
Did we get those in advance? Because I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
No, I'm sorry, those actually didn't go out. I was not time to finish them.
Okay, so we'll carry those over?
Yes, please, thank
So we're
you.
going to carry over November 6th. What about October 15th executive session minutes? We have
We got
Those were sent in advance, yes.
Okay.
Those
Is there a
are-
motion to approve?
Yeah, I move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Okay. Do we have a need for a executive session today?
No.
So there's no amendments to the agenda. Although we're going to arrange, I know David's got a very important personal call about 3:30. So,
We try to finish them. Don't speak too much.
no, we're going to, well, first, first, do we have any public comments? Does anybody?
No.
No?
No.
Anybody forgot to sign in but wants to talk? Okay. All right, board attorney report, Kevin?
I have nothing to report. The judicial watch is ongoing. Discovery finishes in December, and then the state and judicial watch will presumably be filing cross motions for summary judgment on the issue of the state's decision not to produce certain records under the NBRA.
But we're still dismissed in the case, correct?
We are watching from afar.
Okay. Is there any old
Watching
business?
judicial watch from afar.
Is there any old business that we have to address?
I had a quick question of
Sure.
Mr. Karpinski. Kevin, do you think that, are they expected to want to take discovery from anybody at the county board level?
They have not expressed any interest. They were setting up the corporate designee deposition for the state board, but no one has contacted me, and I have just simply followed the docket, by checking it electronically.
Okay.
Oh, there was one other issue. We have gotten a letter from of the public interest, which is a follow-up to a request that they had sent a couple years ago requesting documentation. We produced records they wanted regarding individuals who had been canceled and other information. The letter was sent to us about 2 weeks before the election. I contacted the lawyer for public interest, explained that staff was busy doing things, getting ready for the election, and that we would be responding, in December or January. He was fine with that. So I'm working with the Assistant Attorney General to go ahead and coordinate what documents are going to be produced.
Are we going to move?
Is it
I'm sorry.
a follow-up on their earlier one? Is this additional names or something
Yeah,
to be
it's
reviewed?
more
Is
up
that-
to date, and I was remiss in not forwarding it to you. I'll send you the request itself, just so you have it for your records. We haven't done anything with it because, given the timing of it, they were certainly understanding that it would wait until December or January.
Okay. Okay, we're going to go into board member observations of the general election, and we'll start with David.
Thank you. First off, some general comments. I thought that generally things ran quite smoothly. I thought that a lot of places that we went, both in early voting and on election day, people seemed to need more people than they had. And in some cases, they also needed more scanners and more room. I also wanted to comment that although I don't think it's necessarily anything different for this election than the past ones, but it seems like every election we do have a number of postal service issues. And I know that we've talked about trying to address those. We had an example recently from Councilmember Katz where it appears that somebody requested their absentee ballot and did not receive it by U.S. mail as they should have. and we don't know how many of those. I imagine that by definition we won't know how many there are because until we hear about them. But anything that we can do in the future to both impact the Postal Service and also to remind our voters as to how they can avoid falling into that situation, I think would be worthwhile. As far as early voting goes, I heard from people over and over again who voted in Silver Spring about how remarkably well that went, about how there were huge numbers and that people made it through quite quickly. And that was not just from political people, that was from people at work, that was from acquaintances. I mean, basically, it seemed to be a fairly unanimous view. So kudos to the Silver Spring team, because I know that's a very hard thing to do, but something that's that large. I think I mentioned this by email, but I want to mention it again, that I think that anything that we can do to encourage people in early voting to vote early in early voting and not to vote on the last day of early voting. It seems that we always run into issues on the last day of early voting, and I know that we do some of that already. But whatever we're doing, we have a lot of human nature to overcome where it comes to that, and so I think anything that we can do to encourage that. One idea that I had, that I know I have told this to people when they, when they ask about early voting, I've had people sometimes ask me, well, if I want to avoid a line, when do I vote on early voting? And the one thing that I can tell them is, well, I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you that typically the busiest hour is the last hour, and the second busiest hour is the second to last hour. But it occurs to me that if we were to make public, just on our website or somewhere, the statistics on when people vote for early voting by either day or time or whatever it is, that might encourage at least some people to rearrange their behavior so that they aren't voting at the time that most people are voting, or at least are considering doing it differently. So just an idea for that.
Can I raise an issue with that one, just as a question?
Sure.
Do we know, one of the things that I think is so great is that people can go online and see in real time what the waits are at different places.
Right.
Of course, if it's the last 2 hours of voting,
right,
they don't have a choice
right,
after that.
Right.
But are people making use of that, do we know?
Well, we certainly do push it.
Yeah.
And the only comment I really have to say about, we do push out the message that if for early voting, avoid the first day and avoid the last. But I'm also going to say that I have been placed in a situation with, in the past with board members, that when we put up that there's a 90-minute wait, I'm being told that I'm suppressing the vote, which seems to be, the big thing these days. So I find that it's a very delicate balancing act. A historical view might take some of the sting out of that type of information.
So you mean if it shows on whatever day of early voting,
it shows
that there's
Gore Park, 90 minutes.
A 90-minute wait.
And someone suggested that was...
A board member suggested that we were suppressing the vote by putting out that information.
Sorry?
It wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me.
Not me.
Well, I use it. I find it to be a very useful tool.
Yeah.
I sit there on my computer and go,
that,
there's a 2-minute wait at Potomac or wherever I want to vote,
right.
And it's terrific to be able to go ahead and use that.
Yeah. No, I wondered if we knew if people were taking advantage of it, but
Huberto, did a great job, I think, this session, pushing out that message, to vote early, to take advantage of the wait times. It was on our Facebook page. It was Jessica was pushing it out on Instagram. I know, I'm not really a Twitter person, so I don't have a clue as to what's going on there, but I'm sure that some of the staff, whoever's managing that, probably pushed out that information. I also know that the state board was also pushing that message out statewide, that to avoid the first day, avoid the last day, otherwise, and particularly the first couple hours and the last couple hours, because there's going to be a line.
We certainly do know, anecdotally, we hear of people who tell us that they went to some early voting site they hadn't been to before because they went to the website.
Right.
Damascus had more than 1,000 voters on the last day.
And if we have to figure out a way to balance that messaging to show people that we're trying to be helpful and that we're not trying to discourage them, either by saying wait time at Bohr is X, but wait time at such and such down the street is Y, or, there must be some. I don't have the answer, obviously, off the top of my head, and I'm sure no one else may either, but there's got to be a way to provide that information, because I think most people would rather have the information than not have it. And I think, actually, I've also heard positive commentary about the wait time. So anyway, just moving on, we are currently doing early voting in 3 gymnasiums at Damascus, Lawton, and Potomac, and I think that we need to consider doing it in a number of other places. The first one being Gaithersburg, where they actually have a very large gym in that facility. I realize that we have to negotiate
2 gyms.
Well, it's essentially one very large one with a divider, but either way. And either half would be substantially larger than the space that we have now, and I realize that it takes effort to negotiate that arrangement. Whatever we can do to help, we'd like to. But that particular polling place was, that was. Obviously one of our more crowded places, but there also are gyms available in a number of other locations, and we have to think about whether that should be our standard, especially for a presidential election. And I'm not suggesting that every single one of them required it, but I know that Praisner, Mid-County, Germantown, and presumably the new place in Wheaton will have a gymnasium, and we should think about by looking at those locations, whether the extra space would be valuable to avoid this.
David, don't you think though that would we'd basically be having to tell people that they can't use the gyms for a whole week? Which is what we do now in Potomac, Damascus, and Chevy Chase. Well, is that what we do in Potomac? Yes. Did it switch over to the gym? Yes. I wasn't there this year. Yes. Where it was 2 years ago. Yes, it was in the gym. So, and the center director was very happy about using the gym as opposed to the smaller room. I think the voters are happy too, because I think for our staff it also means that the lines. One of the problems at Gaithersburg was that the lines were interfering with each other, because there's only so much place for people to stand in line. You have to stand in line for ballots, stand in line for a voting space, and stand in line for the scanner. You mean at Bohr Park? At Bohr Park. They were using one of those party rooms? They were using a combination of the party rooms. That's all we've used thus far at Bohr Park. And I think we made it work as best as it could, but I still think that if it was in the gymnasium, it would, we would be in much better shape, and we wouldn't have the long lines that we did. Because Mid-County's a bigger room, as you know. Yes, Mid-County would be the one that I would have almost the least concern, although I would want to, talk to people who were there, because it does have a very large room. That's not the gym. I mean, I was there on the last night of early voting. I think there might have been 50 people in line. Took maybe 15 minutes to get through. Nothing. I mean, not terrible. Right.
You had 4 scanners though. Mid-County has 4.
Yeah, they had a lot of scanners.
Right. Part of what I'm suggesting is not only based on the extreme need in each of these places, but it's also since we have a limited ability to predict what's going to happen. Our safest bet in terms of everyone feeling like they've been treated fairly is to try and do similar things across the county. And so for people who are in Gaithersburg and waiting in a very long line and discover that Potomac is in the gymnasium while Gaithersburg is not. That's not necessarily the message that I think that we want to send.
Although Gaithersburg probably wouldn't want to trade the parking issue with Potomac.
No, understood.
There's always something,
Understood. There are 3 places that don't have gymnasiums that, again, I thought ran rather smoothly. Especially, I think that we were short a number of scanners on the first day. And in my recollection, we've been short on scanners on the first day, sometimes before. And whatever we can do to be right at the beginning, I think would be helpful. But once we got everything kind of rearranged at the EOB, my sense was that Silver Spring, the EOB, and Sandy Spring were not lacking in terms of space. But yeah, to the extent that we can figure out the scanners thing earlier, and to the extent that we can get additional scanners, which I think we should all talk about kind of the strategy for how to do that. I think in order to do that, we just have to show that we're doing everything that we can to make things better aside from the scanners, that we're not just relying on the scanners as
Just for your understanding, Margaret, I have a question. Why we cannot provide 3 scanners to each early voting center? Why we cannot do that to begin?
4.
3. I mean, all of them have 2, then 1
was based on levels of participation. We looked at the assignment of scanners at the presidential and believe, first of all, you have to understand that we're making the assignment of the equipment probably 12 months prior to the election day.
I'm saying that why we do not supply 3 scanners?
Because the last election, the presidential election, we only needed 2 scanners at Mid-County. We never had any problems with the scanners. The issue this go-around was we had a 3-page ballot, and I did not know in November of 2017 that we were going to have a 3-page ballot and the impact that would have on process, because that's where there were huge lines at, the scanner.
Do those decisions have to be made that early?
Yeah.
Why?
Because we have to find out how much equipment we need. We have to determine how many election judges we need. We need to know how many poll books we need. We need to make sure that we have all the correct rooms. I mean, it's a huge
so we need to make those
process.
decisions, all those decisions, before we know what's on the ballot.
Yes.
Okay.
And am I correct that isn't there an electrical issue with the scanners? They can't just be plugged in anywhere.
Special
I think.
plug, put them in.
Yeah, so sometimes, I know there, was it at St. Catherine's where we didn't have the option of bringing in another scanner there. We really didn't need it, but when it was looked at, because there isn't the electrical capability for it.
EOB had limited number of plugs to use.
No, EOB didn't have a problem. I knew that.
Yeah.
Because I was there. In presidential, we had 2, and then requested we had 3, because it was a backup. Therefore, we had 3.
Now, here, I'd like to make a suggestion that piggybacks on yours, which is that perhaps the place to start is not just with a specific number per location, but to start with what we ended up with in this election. Because we had trial by fire on the first day, and then we had a number of different adjustments that we made. And I think that although obviously we're not suggesting that things were perfect, that by the end we felt much more comfortable with what we had out there than what we did at the beginning. So if there were, I know that EOB I think had 3 at the end, and if we could have 3, if we could start off with 3, for the next election, which is the presidential, and start off with wherever we ended up in these other places, I think that. Otherwise, we could be kind of repeating over, predicting turnout is obviously very difficult, and predicting wait time also very difficult. But at least starting where we ended up might be one way to pursue that.
The other thing that I'll just note, which Margaret didn't say, was that we left everything out there on the field. And so every additional scanner that we send out to early voting is one less scanner that we have available to send out on election day. We can't reuse them. So if we want to hold the reserves for election day, we can't use those reserves during early voting. We have to make some predictions about the balance of what we need.
Well, and part of what I'm thinking is, and I know that some of us have talked about it informally, is whether we want to make the case for more. And it may be that, once we do an analysis of how things worked for both early voting and election day, and we explain to our funders, why it is that we can't just take scanner A from early voting and use it on election day, or why it is that we actually need more machines. My sense is that there'll be, as long as we're doing what we can to make things go more smoothly otherwise, I would think that there would be some support for that.
I would just like to make one tiny point here, and that is we are sitting on literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of ballot marking equipment that we cannot use. That ballot marking equipment was designed to use during early voting. The significant customer difference of scanning one thin sheet of paper versus 3 pages
5 pages.
5 pages. It definitely had a negative impact. And as for your suggestion with regards to using the numbers at the end, Janet and I agree with you, and I've already made that decision.
Great.
So, but I would hope that by March of 2020, that the SBE and ES&S have come to some sort of agreement so that we are sitting on a lot more equipment. That all this equipment we're sitting on that we can't use, or we're using it, but not with the blessing of the state, that we can use the ballot marking device, because that's going to solve a lot of problems. But are we still going to need scanners? You are correct.
Margaret,
David, we are going to need scanners.
Margaret, did you mean March of 2020? Because that seems very close to the primary election.
I would hope.
I would have thought it had to be earlier than that.
Well,
It was supposed to be now.
Right.
yeah.
Well,
I mean, and obviously it was supposed to be back in the beginning of 2016 when
David, I wanna-
January of
Yes,
2016.
yes.
David,
No,
I
I remember. You guys are on
David,
top
I
of
want to
it.
remind you, in case
Yeah.
you don't know the history,
Yeah.
Montgomery County received the new electronic poll books 2 days before the election of September of 2006. So we were receiving and uploading polling place information on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, taking them to route order. So was that the best way to do something? No. But is it the state board's manner of doing it? It seems like it does seem that way. You're right. Allison and I are probably going to sit down in March and start trying to calculate what we need.
March of 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the other thing is, if we get new scanners, we need more black carts. And to get more black carts, we're going to, and we have to determine how many scanners we need, then we have an issue of space. So then if we have an issue of space, then some walls are going to have to be torn down. And we're going to have to shift some other things around. So, I mean, it's not just, hey, give me 5 more scanners.
Sure. No, 5 obviously is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a major
Margaret, when you planned for this election, were you assuming the number of scanners that we had at early voting centers in this 2016 general election?
Yes.
Which is interesting, though, isn't it? Because overall turnout this year was not as high as 2016, which is what you would expect.
Well,
but I guess the general election turnout was pretty close to it.
I'm going to, David, am I totally raining on your parade here?
You are, but that's okay.
Okay, Allison put this together for you all, and I'll share it with you. This is the numerics, and then this is the graphs.
While you're handing out, Mike, you had something about the scanners?
Not just the scanners, but just in general. Obviously, decisions on what you need are decisions that need to be made by you, but it appears that everything you're talking about is going to be necessitate additional budget dollars. And I would suggest that rather than wait until the last minute and those budgets being prepared, that we meet with the executive as soon as possible and let him know what those requirements are going to be.
That's fine.
Marty, this is a very impressive chart, especially. Okay, Allison, it's a very impressive chart. And in particular, what I'm noticing is how close the election day turnout for 2018 general election is to the 2016 general election turnout, like a difference of 7,000, not even 7,000 votes.
We saw that.
So
For
election day, right. I mean, obviously, the overall turnout was, there was 70,000 voters difference. And a lot of that was early voting and absentee. But even so, I mean, that's a huge. I mean, that means that basically we need to staff election day like we do a presidential. I mean, which is that's new. I mean, that's you know, obviously. So this is a very interesting chart. Thank you. Did you want me to keep going or to stop? Because I'll go faster. We had an issue that comes up frequently about the storing of political paraphernalia. My suggestion would be, if it's not in the MOU, to put it in the MOU, and that way that could resolve that without too much difficulty. I wanted to comment that although I was very worried about the Gaithersburg cross-country event, that I thought that the way it was handled by our staff, the county, and the school system, they did about as well with it as they could, and that people were able to get in and out. I do think that it makes sense for us to do our best to establish a system where major events are not scheduled at our early voting sites. I mean, we probably know today, at least by today's laws, when early voting is going to be in 2020. So my suggestion would be that we reserve those spaces as soon as possible. The ones that we've used, those that are available, and that we also do what we can to prevent other events from being scheduled in conflict with ours. I know that we have
David, just that's done.
Done.
Those reservations are made, and in the MOU, they're to provide us a schedule of the events that they're to have there.
Excellent.
The problem with what happened in Gaithersburg, the Borough Park, was sort of an anomaly, which is they did not view that as an event at their location because it was actually going to be at Gaithersburg High School. But of course, if it affects parking,
right,
it affects.
Right.
It's the functional equivalent of having an event at that location.
Is this something new in that we put in the MOUs?
We've always had it in the MOU.
Remember, we had the issue with Silver Spring with the bar mitzvah that affected us, and so I thought maybe did we tweak it somehow that wouldn't happen again?
They're required to provide us their schedule of events at the time that they sign the MOU. Unfortunately, sometimes the MOU gets signed, and then the people that are actually running the locations, let's just say that the dates of early voting are not on the forefront of their minds when they're making reservations.
Well, and certainly we all know as attorneys that the law only takes us so far, and so even if the MOU says that something has to happen, it may be that we have to go back to all of the sites and ask them again.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike, you had something on this issue?
Yeah, as far as the storage of materials in public facilities, decision has been made that henceforth that will not be permitted.
Will not be
permitted. That that's the responsibility of the candidates and the parties. It's put too much of a burden on the county facilities, their liability issues, and it has just become too problematic.
Whose decision was that?
That was from the CAO and the county executive.
Okay.
But do we know, Mike, I mean, were there instances of problems?
There were problems.
Once we got it set? Oh, really, there were? I didn't know.
Yes, there were
Okay.
problems for the entire period. And we're
Both
not
the
gonna
primary-
take on the responsibility of the candidates.
Primary and
parties.
general.
It would be helpful not now to get more of the details.
We'll be happy to go into the details
Okay, thank you.
next year.
Thank you. I was at EOB one night where it was really dark because the lights at the driveway were not turned on. And I think that it's actually a safety issue for both voters and workers.
Mr. Newman, I don't know why that happened.
Okay.
It should not happen.
Okay, yeah, because obviously.
Chris took care of that.
In the future that
Yeah.
Chris took care of that.
Those are normally on all the time.
Right, that's what I would have figured.
So
Yeah.
I don't understand why we have that.
I had this, Gracie brought this to my attention at a polling place, and it was as a result of the change in time the weekend before, that
The
at
time
one
change.
particular location, they were on a timer, and they had not reset the timer that their
Right.
lights would come on.
Of course, we're going to face that for every general election, because the change in time now comes on that first Sunday in
I'll make
November.
sure that in the future
wanna say
that
Chris wants to
that's
say something.
discussed with general services and that doesn't repeat.
Chris, you had something on that?
I was just going to add what the discussion has been, that daylight savings, the change affected timers. Some of them we assume are on light sensor, but not all of them. Some of them are on timers, and so we had to make phone calls.
I'd also request that it doesn't matter what it is, how it is, when it is, if somebody has a problem with the facility, call me right away and we'll get in touch with, during the day, even Mr. Dice, or at night, if there's an emergency, supervisor on call.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, one quick idea. I know that we had a significant parking issue at Potomac. I think there's a number of things that we can do potentially to help with that, short of moving the facility, which I would not support, or at least not at this moment. One is to bolster the parking availability in Rockville as a way of taking some of the demand from Potomac and moving it elsewhere. And the other would be to see if we can find parking available that is close by and run shuttles, because there's a number of places that are very close by, Bullis, Cabin John Center, Westfield, Montgomery, Bolger Center, that might be potentials for places that people could park, if, or that staff could park, which I realize is very controversial.
Is far away from Potomac.
I'm sorry?
Richard Montgomery is far
Not
away
Richard
from
Montgomery.
Potomac.
I said Bullis, which is about less than
Bullis,
5 minutes
yes.
away. Cabin John Center, which is about 5 minutes away. Westfield, Montgomery is what I said. That's the Montgomery Mall.
It still is far.
It would not be my first choice, but I'm just saying that there are other places. If we have a way to figure out parking, that seems to be the biggest.
Then you have to have a bus to take you
Yes,
to that
a bus
place.
or a
Oh my
car
God.
or a van or something. Yes,
Margaret's, look at Margaret's face.
I understand this may not end up being the preferred choice. I'm just trying to be creative about ways
Change the
to
location.
well, that's a possibility, but it's always it's always dangerous to take something that is very popular and attempt to change it. I mean, that's what we would be doing. We would essentially be saying that it's too popular, we'd have to change it. Right. We still are desperately in need of a street sign in Sandy Spring that points out where the just one that says what the name of the street is would be a good start. And then the other thing is that there was a temporary electronic sign, and there was a really great one that was near the St. Catherine Church that people basically said turn
They
here.
had electronic sign too.
But the electronic sign in Olney was was much further away, and it indicated that there was early voting at the SSFD, which actually has more than one location. The Sandy Spring Fire Department actually has two different locations.
Yeah.
But what it really needs is something, and I don't know how easy it is, but something that says turn here. And I don't know how to do that, but I feel like we have a lot of time to to figure it out.
Mike's raising his hand.
Mike?
If you have requests like that, again, let me know, and I'll work with Department of Transportation to get those signs up.
Do you need a motion?
It's 2020.
No, I mean, because I think
Phone call, that's all I need.
Okay, because I mean, I think we've talked about this one ever since Sandy Spring became, a polling place. I mean, there is no street sign for Brook Road.
I was frankly
yeah.
very surprised that he and I,
Yeah.
when we,
What is that,
I mean, because
Brook
it
Road
looked as
and
bad as it did
where?
before.
108 and 108.
Now.
Off 108.
Yeah.
Brook Road and 108.
It's almost literally a stone's throw away from the polling place, but you may not know it if you don't know to turn. You can
Right.
go right past
I
it.
did many times.
The road is as big as a driveway,
It
Yeah.
looks like a
so you don't think
driveway.
about it as a
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
thoroughfare.
But you think that area needs a sign more than almost any other because of where it's located?
Yeah, you can't see, it's a hidden.
Oh, yeah, it's really,
It needs a sign because
Go right by it.
our ballot probably lists the address, which it should. But if you're looking for the street, and admittedly today many people are just looking at their phone or their Android Auto or Apple Play
GPS
or whatever. But if you're trying to actually find the street, you can't find it. And if you don't know where and I think many people know where the fire department is. But for people who don't, there was a sign near the only L house on 108 that says voting at the SSFD.
Now you say left hand.
Right, but
on
it
the
doesn't.
outside.
But it's almost a mile away, and at that point,
Yeah.
you still to look for it, but you don't know where to turn. So
literally.
yes,
I mean, they know where the firehouse is, they don't know where the annex is. It's a problem, and I agree, it's a difficult
yeah,
place to turn into. It does need a sign.
yeah. Thank you. Someone suggested to me, someone who was not very tall, that it would be helpful to either have a step stool at the polls or a lower voting booth for shorter voters, because apparently standing at the booth is a challenge for some
Step-stool is
people.
a liability if they
Don't
fell
say-
down. Here, Montgomery
We have
was-
seated,
we have seated
areas,
voting.
seated voting at all of the polling
They can
places
sit
that I'm
down.
That's
aware
true,
of.
they can sit.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, just passing that one along.
Step-stool is out of question. Somebody fell down, here we go.
Okay. On election day, no, that's not it. First of all, I want to thank the staff. I always get my trip down memory lane on election day and the night before election day. I think I visited every polling place where I've ever voted. At precinct 1311, which is Forest Knolls Elementary School, they had huge crowds. This was early on election day. They needed more voting booths. They needed more ballot people. They needed more scanners. And what they really needed was to move to the gymnasium down the hall. It was empty. Anyway, something to consider. They're voting in an all-purpose room, and the lines were interfering with each other. And anyway, it seemed like it could use some more space there. I wrote down a number of things relating to my afternoon and evening in 523 at the Praisner Center, and I realized that at any minute now I'm going to have to excuse myself. So let me just kind of run through quickly, and I'll be happy to come back, or we could have the conversation later. I think that it would be useful to get a sense, just like we got here for recent times across the county, it might be useful to get a sense for at least recent years what 523 was like for the primary and the general, and also what our resources were that we devoted on those occasions. I also think it'd be useful to compare the number of provisional ballots that are caused by being at the wrong polling place, both compared to past years and also compared to other precincts that are either at or near early voting centers. We know from the primary that among the precincts where we had the most provisional votes, across the county were precincts that were early voting centers, and obviously that's an education issue for potentially for us to make sure that voters understand what the rules are, for early voting compared to election day, and any other measures that we can take. I guess I have a question, which is there a formula for the number of scanners that we give on election day to polling places?
Yes.
Is there any reason why that formula can't be shared publicly?
I believe the person that developed the formula lectured, or not lectured, but gave a speech and gave you his website, but we can certainly get it to you again.
Okay. I think it would be useful for whenever we have our more detailed conversation about this to also see how it was applied in this election, just to demonstrate to folks if we're following a consistent formula across the county. I think that helps a lot for people to understand. I also know that we added resources on election day morning in a number of different places. And I know that a lot of times we add them based on the reporting that we do from when we're out in the field. We also have a tendency to hear from some people more than others with complaints about what's going on. I know that in my day job that I don't always want to only respond to the people who are complaining the loudest, because sometimes the people who rarely complain but are complaining on that occasion, they actually have more reason to complain. So I would just want us to kind of think about how it is that we respond to those. Again, realizing that we have a limited resource. We can't all day long say scanner over here, scanner over there, because we do run out. If I could get a list of any precincts that had more than 2 scanners, or at least it ended up with more than 2 scanners, I think that would be helpful.
For the record, the only scanners that were sent out were to replace a second scanner where there was only one functioning.
I believe I know of at least one example where there were 3.
Where?
From the get-go, you mean?
No. I believe that it was reported that 723 had 3 scanners later in the day. 3 operating scanners. Is that correct?
Which one?
But had one broken down? Is that why they got an extra?
I believe.
I mean, it could have, broken down and then
723
been fixed.
did not receive a scanner.
Did not receive a scanner.
No.
Okay.
That's part of the mythology.
Well, it was part of the mythology that came in on a text on my phone from one of my colleagues, but that's okay.
Which one is 723?
Which one is that?
That's Swollen. So you're saying that there's no precinct that got more than 2 scanners to start with, and
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so what did you say?
You said you wanted to know where scanners went if there were 3 scanners. That's not what. The only scanners that we sent out were where there was only one functioning, and the non-functioning scanner was the second scanner.
Okay.
So every place was supposed to have 2 functioning scanners. If they had 3 scanners and they called and said there were 2, we would send a technician out, try to get the 3rd one up and running, which we generally were successful.
But you're saying that they had 3 when they're supposed to have 2. You're saying that
there weren't. They were supposed to have 3.
Well, I'm totally confused now. I thought you just said that no one was supposed to have 3.
David, some polling places, depending upon the size, are allocated 3 scanners.
That's what I wanted to know.
Okay, so
Which polling places are allocated 3 scanners? How many voters do they have? How do they get allocated 3 scanners?
Based on the formula.
Right. Okay. That's great. That's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to find out. I would like to get a sense as to those places that have 3 scanners, how many voters they have to have. Is it based on registered voters? Is it based on turnout? Whatever it is. And I think that it's the kind of information that I think it would be very much in our interest to share with others. Once we get it, and it sounds like it's already been shared publicly from other sources. So that sounds great. An observation about Tilden Middle School, where we had 410 and 418. One was in the gym and one was in the cafeteria, and I was an advocate of that and still would be, given the circumstance that we were facing, which was not a good one, but it was what we had. We had a big difference between the primary and the general in terms of our ability to successfully get people into the right place with little effort, and I went over there that morning in order to try and assist it. I don't know exactly what the difference was, but in the primary we had almost no complaints, and in the general it seemed like people, it took a lot more effort to get people to go where they were going. Now, there were other issues that were going on in those precincts as well, but to me, I think what the difference was, I think you have to have a human being who is at the very front door.
He was there. Tilden, you talking?
There was
a gentleman right there telling people where to go when we went there in the afternoon.
Yes.
You were there early in the morning,
I was
right?
there in the morning,
Yeah.
and there was a gentleman, for part of the time I was there, who was trying to do that, I think we may have to help people with their script for what it is, for what it is they're saying to people.
I believe, that do
Yeah.
that, the greeters, if
Yeah.
you will, that
Yeah.
are placed there, are largely come from the state, don't they, Margaret? Yes, so they don't even live here.
They don't even know the geography.
They don't know. They
Right.
don't know the area at all.
But which makes that a very interesting job for them in that situation, because what I would usually say to people when they came out, I'm very familiar with it. It's near where both of us are.
Yeah.
I basically ask people which side of Old Georgetown Road they live on, and that would determine. You
did an excellent job of that, because by the time we got there, that's exactly what he was asking
Okay,
people.
exactly. Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay, good.
So it worked.
Good. Okay. Okay. Last thing is just that we may want to have some greater explanation to people about how and when the emergency bypass is used. There definitely was some misinformation, including by some of our own people, as to what the rules were. There was some people were told incorrectly that the ballots that are in the emergency bypass would be scanned here as opposed to at the precinct, which made some voters uncomfortable. I think there are some voters that will be uncomfortable with the emergency bypass no matter what. They want to see their vote being counted. But to the extent that it's an alternative to waiting in line at the scanner for people, or at least to waiting very long, we just may want to think about how we, without encouraging its use too much, still get the word out that that is an option for people and how that works. And I realize that's a difficult balance.
So it's the information to the voters.
Yeah. Well, and to
the judges.
And to the judges too, because it doesn't come up that often.
Because it's not used. It's not used just to say if you don't want to wait in line, put it in, right?
No.
It's only
No.
used when the scanner goes down.
It's used when a scanner goes down. But at Tilden that morning, there was a scanner down for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so there were people who were waiting in a very long line for the other scanner, and some people who were looking very, very uncomfortable waiting, who were then offered the opportunity to use the emergency bypass, and you got very different reactions from people, some of whom were like, no way, no how, I'm putting it in myself, and I'm going to watch it go into that scanner, and others who are like, oh, I don't have to wait in this line? Great. And yeah, I'm not suggesting that it should be available as an alternative to the line on any occasion, but when you have a scanner down and you have long lines at the scanner,
then you would favor the chief judge
Well, and a lot of
allowing
people
that as an option.
took advantage of it. That's where Naheed and I,
right.
we actually are
You
were the people that
you actually
put them in.
put them through. Good,
Yes.
good. Thank you.
They did it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took 2 hours.
Took 2 hours?
Of the two of us
Wow.
constantly feeding it in. Yeah.
Wow.
So there were a
Yeah.
lot of people that used that bypass.
Yes.
The standing for 2 hours
Yeah.
scanning
Yeah.
it.
And Alex, I don't know that I would have it available as an option under every circumstance, but I think it's better than people walking away. And I guess we just have to figure out what that, if we have criteria for when we use it, then we have to know what those are. We have to tell people. I mean, if any time a scanner goes down, it's an option. Then then I think we have to say so.
If the scanner's down, you don't just use it because there's a line.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Alan?
Okay, number of things. I sent out an email during early voting that covered early voting, but I want to cover some things here in particular. But I also echo what David said, that generally speaking, the early voting centers and the precincts ran very smoothly. Poll workers were very well trained. Staff was great. Everybody worked hard. I thought basically, while there were glitches, it was basically a very well-run election. A couple of the highlights about early voting, some of the issues I saw at Potomac. The Senator Director, Larry, said they should have access at 8 o'clock the first day to set up on time. They really pushed from 9 o'clock to 10 to get everything set up. And they had a problem. There were only 2 poll books operating at first. It took about 1.5 hours to get up to full strength. I think it was Brian who was there. And Brian, having difficulty, connecting to the state database. You know what it is. You better than me. I don't know, but that was a problem. I don't know if it duplicated anyplace else, but that's a major early voting center, and it created humongous lines until Brian was able to fix it and get it up and running fine. We had 3 scanners there at Potomac, and then we got a 4th one later on, early in the afternoon, and that really helped. Boer, I'll echo what David said. It's just too small. They could have used more intake judges, more room for ballot judges, more scanners, but the room was just plain too small for all that. Lawton, there was an idiosyncrasy. There were 3 irregular ballots without tracks on both sides of the paper. Like there's a plane here and there are 2 tracks over here. So they spoil those. I don't know if it occurred in any other place, but it was something that threw people and threw the judges at first because they couldn't scan those. There were no dots on the left-hand side. Let's see, they had 2 scanners there, and one of the scanners didn't work well. A tech from the state board came to fix it, and it worked better, but it still hiccuped occasionally after that. St. Catherine, the electronic sign on Beers Mill was great. I recently learned of a problem at Damascus, which I mentioned here on page 1, where the judges had not opened any of the boxes of ballots from districts outside of their district. Each person in line called out their district when they got to the front of the line, and she said that the workers frantically tore open boxes, tried to find the ballot. People had to wait until that box was found, and it took too long. Ballot marking devices were added to the early voting centers as the early voting progressed. That was great. General election. Let's see. One of the issues I saw there at St. Catherine. I told Kevin about the problem there with the room divider. Did they open up the room then after a while?
They were not able to do that.
They didn't. Where?
St.
Matthew.
St. Matthew.
Presbyterian Church?
St. Catherine.
What room divider? Mary Ann was perking up here.
We'll need to work on it for the next election.
It was about the smallest polling place I've ever seen.
It was supposed to be open. They were using it for storage, I believe. Chris reached out to St. Matthews, and we weren't able to use the extra space.
Correct. They had an issue with their kitchen, and it had to be fumigated. So everything that would have not been in that 3rd area had been moved in there for storage out of the kitchen. But normally that area should be available to us.
Okay. Also, there were reports of so-called pre-marked ballots, and I think the problem was probably spoiled ballots that weren't discarded properly. I gave Kevin the name of one voter. Did you check with him about what happened?
I did, and I think it was exactly what happened. The election judge didn't properly spoil it.
Yeah.
It was handed to the voter.
Yeah.
And Al and I did actually then follow up with the judges to make sure that there wasn't another issue with any other ballots. I think it was just an election judge error.
On pages 2 and 3, I have specific issues that I encountered and how we attempted to resolve them. Along the trail during the early voting and the general, judges gave me suggestions that would, for best practices, and I'll share those here, the things to think about for the future. One judge suggested the chief judges photograph or video the polling place after it's set up before the voters come in, so they could see the best layout to use for that precinct, and that they could replicate that layout in future elections. Let's see. Two, intake. One judge said have the intake judge write A on the upper left-hand corner of the VAC so that the ballot judge would realize this voter needed assistance. You all know about NINA using her orange tape to lead to the provisional ballot table. Early voting centers and polling places put numbers on the intake and ballot tables to direct voters, so that the greeter would say, go to the poll book at 2, or pick up your ballots at number 4 there, whatever. Burtonsville marked off the electioneering zone outside with blue tape. So if the cones were to move around, blow around, and that happened a few places because of the winds, if you have tape out there, it makes it easier to see what's proper and what's not.
Blue tape is at every early voting site. Yeah,
on the ground?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I mean,
I didn't see it everywhere.
I think Humberto is the king of blue tape.
Okay.
Put it everywhere.
Okay. Maybe I didn't notice it elsewhere. Okay. One of the judges said, make sure there's a full roll of paper in the scanners when they go out. Evidently, there was one place where they didn't have a full roll, and they ran out early. Somebody had this interesting suggestion here. When voters' addresses are marked in the poll book as 0 confidential, they can't ask that voter, what is your address? And so one chief judge suggested intake judges ask, without giving your address, is there anything special about your address? And the voter would say, yes, confidential. And then, okay, you are the right person. Yeah. Of course, those people really ought to vote by absentee ballot. They should.
We send them a letter telling them that too.
Yeah, they should be doing that.
We don't have too many confidential voters, do we? Do we?
I mean, compared to the number of voters, no, but
we do have a significant number.
You know,
probably the most in the state.
Probably, that's true.
Yeah, between federal, high-ranking federal employees and judges and law enforcement.
Okay.
And domestic
abuse.
Another suggestion was to keep on encouraging the poll workers and campaign workers to park far from the early voting center. And Margaret sent out the letters there. They probably didn't pay attention to it. I don't know if there's some way to penalize if they don't do it, but I saw it mostly, of course, at Potomac, but they need to park someplace else. Leave the parking places for the voters. Now, Allison knows about this. Stanchions are really great. There are places where you get some stanchions to mark off lines for intake, lines for getting your ballots. Those stanchions are really very good to keep the voters in line to the right place. Using chairs for senior disabled persons to sit on while they wait. Some places use those. At Potomac, a voter's child put a sticker, I voted sticker on the ballot before it's scanned. Of course, the scanner wouldn't accept it, so they made the point there at Potomac, don't give out these stickers until after the voter has voted. Some places they were telling voters it was a 3-page ballot, and that was a good idea, so they realized there are 3 pages. You need to write on all 3 pages if you want to, front and back, and then put in 3 pages into the scanner. Separate table for registering new voters were possible. Separate table for spoil ballots were possible. Okay, for the future, more scanners. Everybody knows about that. You know about Borough Park being way too small. I agree that Potomac Rec Center is a victim of its own success. There's patently inadequate parking. We need to figure out how to remediate this problem in the future. One judge suggested that the Board of Elections sample ballot indicate the voters' polling places in boldface and larger font, so maybe they'll see it better, so they don't keep on going to the wrong place. And I agree it's essential to have a permanent street sign at 108 and Brook Road. You have, this is Brook Road, another one says Sandy Spring Fire Department. Some say that the Silver Spring Early Voting Center still needs to have better notices for disabled voters about the access through the loading dock. In early voting, a judge asked if it's an alternative to having the handicap accessible sign by a BMD. Instead of having that sign by the BMD, you don't want to. People who have visual difficulties, of course, want to use that, but there are people young people want to use it. I used it. It was just fun to use, and it was faster, I thought. It got so at Praisner, we were at the very end there, like 9 o'clock at night. We were pushing people to use it until the line got very, very long for the BMD, so we stopped pushing them there. We said, okay, we go over to the regular handwritten ballots. It'll be faster for you. Let's see. I think tell the state board that the ballot should say at the top, use black ballpoint pens, not felt tip pens. We don't. The bleeding it screws up the ballots, as you know. Also, in the voting booth, a direction to the effect that voters should use a black ballpoint pen to fill in the ovals. Don't use checks or X's. One of the judges suggested having chief judges at the election polling places serve in the early voting centers, each department, to get an idea of what was involved there. And then we discussed the emergency ballot compartment. I did not know about that until election day, that you could use the emergency ballot compartment as a scanner for putting in ballots. Mark Hoffman of the Democratic Party raised the question, like, where is it provided for this? And I saw that there's a mention of it on page 11.31 of the Judge's Manual, but the manual does not inform judges that they can receive these ballots and insert them into the compartment before the end of voting.
They're trained on it.
Yeah, well, they are.
Okay.
I mean, I took training, and I know they're trained on it.
Who is Mark Hoffman, Alan?
Mark Hoffman is the voter protection director for the Montgomery County Democratic Party.
What was it, Democratic Party?
Yeah, Montgomery County
Your
Democratic
successor?
My successor, yes. Future legislation or rulemaking to consider. Amend the election code to allow voters to drop off absentee ballots at the polling places.
Oh, no.
And allow the board to treat those ballots as if they were sent to the board office. So you get people who would come in there and they had the ballot with them, and they obviously voted provisional ballots. If you leave your ballot there in some other form, whether it's scanned or in the emergency compartment or whatever, that belongs to the Board of Elections. So why couldn't an absentee ballot also belong to the Board of Elections when you leave it at the polling place, as opposed to putting it into, having to do a provisional ballot? Drive-by voting for disabled voters who didn't vote by absentee ballots. Some places like Virginia and South Carolina have a mechanism for disabled voters to vote from their cars. This probably requires a rule or a change in COMAR or statute to fix this right here, but a number of people after the election made a suggestion to me. And then some people also suggested adding early voting centers in the county, especially if you keep Potomac. One judge suggested you have additional early voting centers at the Montgomery College in Rockville or Leisure World. I know there are difficulties in both places, but to augment existing early voting centers, not to replace them. So those are some ideas to pass on for consideration in the future. But basically, there's a very well elected.
Thanks, Alan. Mary Ann?
Thank you. I don't have a great deal. First of all, for early voting centers, Yay, St. Catherine's. I know we'll never be there again, but it's a really good facility in terms of its size, and picking up on what Alan was saying about use of stanchions, I don't know if you noticed that there,
Yes.
but they really alleviate a lot of line problems by creating them, especially at the ballot tables and things like that. And it just keeps people orderly within the areas and sort of not bleeding into another group, you know, if you're waiting for a ballot and also waiting for a voting booth or something like that. So I think that kind of situation, they were a good example of how to set up an early voting center.
Yeah, Mary Ann, I was there on Saturday afternoon to help my sister-in-law vote, and it was not many people. Good time to go. And Jim and the whole crew was running it really well, and the clergy room was a really nice.
No,
Jim Epstein is
they had a
even though
great
he
staff
told me
there.
to take off my badge and my name tag.
I had to take mine off to vote too, so don't feel
But
bad.
Jim, you know, well, all right.
I know, yeah.
I don't know, you know, that seemed a little odd.
Well,
so,
I appreciate people that are sticklers for the rules, but you know.
But is that?
I
That's
was
not
there
a rule.
all day,
It's not-
every
it's
day.
not a rule. It's
When I went to vote, you know.
I said, look, Jim, David Naiman told me I could wear that.
So I voted at Lawton after that. I put myself in my pocket so people wouldn't see it.
Really?
I heard what you did there.
The ballot marking device was very popular there, to the point that we, you know, had a seating area where people waited in line to use the ballot marking device. Not that they were necessarily handicapped, but if we could get those up and running, it would, you know.
We can get them running. It's getting permission.
It would be, well, no, there's a problem with the software.
We need to get it fixed.
You know, they need to still run smoother than it runs. But I think people will really want to use it, and heaven knows it'll certainly save a lot of the problems we're talking about here and that we see as a result of lines. Potomac, in addition to the parking, the electioneering's a bit of a problem there. People were, the couple of times that I was there, they're a little too close to that entrance.
Yeah, it
And
goes like this.
it's really, you know, off-putting to those who don't like to be electioneered, you know, when you're really kind of fighting your way to the door.
Was the
And of course, we had an incident there.
It's actually, though, Marianne, the only place where you can go where you have no electioneering, because there's a second side door that you can walk right through.
Yeah.
At the very back of the building.
Oh, really?
No one sees you. You walk right into the entrance.
But a lot of people probably don't know that. I mean, I guess if you're local and you use the facility a lot, maybe you know, but.
Was the boundary clearly defined, though, there?
Oh,
It was, but
the blue tape was down.
it was. But it's, you know, people just have the tables and things, but, you know, people start talking and it just has a way of inching forward or whatnot. And there was an incident that I got called out there to help alleviate. It had already been taken care of, but where, you know, two parties were had a consternation over a sign, and it fell down and got demolished. And
it wasn't our business.
But anyway, it you know, I think that's something in the future that maybe we do want to look at those boundaries for electioneering. I think that's it for early voting. Election day, many thanks for my own home precinct, 417, which got moved from the dreaded aquatic center, which had been, you know, such a problem on, and everybody seemed to get the notice well and understood it. You know, people in my building would come up to me and said, "Oh, I see we're voting somewhere different." So I thought the notices that went out regarding that were really good. And of course the new site was very popular with everyone. It worked really nicely at the temple, and plenty of parking, easy to get in and out, nice big room. That was terrific. Walter Johnson, there was difficulty with the entrance there. Did you get by there at all, David, on election day?
No. Which entrance was it?
Well,
the cafeteria entrance?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Cafeteria is where they vote.
Right.
No, or did they vote in the gym? It's the room at the end.
Cafeteria.
It's the cafeteria. Okay. That had been the entrance before when I was there. This time it got moved up closer to the middle of the building because of the handicap issue. They have a system of ramps there that, had to be designed by an architect and then some. I've never seen such an elaborate...
where you then have to go downstairs or down the ramp.
Down the ramp.
Yeah, so it's a significant distance.
It's significant distance. I don't think there's anything you can do in terms of handicapped people that need the ramps that have that.
Unless you use the cafeteria entrance.
There was a reason why they didn't use that entrance, though, for handicap. I guess it's to get up on the curb there, but certainly you could get along. The curb in front of that is not, whereas there's a cut in the curb for this other entrance. That's the only thing I can think of. And if you don't take the ramps, the stairs that you have to go down are worth your life. So it was not a good scene. In addition, they had people exiting from the old entrance, the entrance that goes right into. So those doors were open. So you had a significant number of people entering that way too. And of course, it was nowhere near where they had to go to sign in, and people would come in, and it was pouring rain, and they didn't know where to go. And so it was a little bit of a mess. That entrance definitely needs to be looked at there. And then I ended my day at Garrett Park from about 4 o'clock until 8 o'clock, and where there were significant lines. And what I saw there was it was a line management issue. It really was not that there the scanners were working, but you just needed a couple of extra people to not be doing the busy work, working the poll book, handing out the ballots, but you need somebody to get them into the next place. And just having that one person, that's how I spent my time, and I moved around to the different areas, but, hustling people to their next location. And it cut it significantly. Of course, what you see, and I think all of us would agree, once a line backs up, you don't end it very quickly. It takes quite a while people are still coming to get that back again. Obviously, the morning lines can disappear because then you get a quiet period. But if you get a problem with line management or whatnot at the end of the day, then you have a problem because it's just not going to alleviate quickly. I think that's really all I saw in terms of any particular issues, but I didn't get around to as many places election day because I spent, the time. I felt it was well worth my staying at Garrett Park at that point. But no, overall, I think people thought it went very well. Just one final thing on the scanners. I'm concerned that these scanners this is new equipment. And my concern was that they were breaking down so all over the place. There was hardly a precinct you went to that hadn't had an issue. Do we assume that's because of the 3-page ballot, or is there something else going on?
And can I add to that, which is that the explanation was given that I know was an explanation, not an excuse, that it's affected by the humidity. But if that's the case, this is not going to be our last election where it rains.
Yeah.
So
I really I can only tell you what was told to me, and that the whole Eastern Seaboard that has these this type of equipment with these paper ballots, the 3-page ballot, which I basically said from the get-go, as soon as we knew we were having it was going to be a problem because of the slowness of the imagery. but the humidity does impact the paper, and then just impacts the paper, and then the voter interaction with the paper ballot, doing things like, putting a wet umbrella on top of their paper ballot, or the coat dripping just an edge, and it created issues.
Okay. Well, I was just amazed that there was so much of it, and my thought was, gee, it's not like our poll books that are truly old and falling apart. I mean, this is
How
no
much
equipment.
do you think? How many do you think? I mean, do you think you were?
Well, there was
affected by-
hardly a precinct, but I guess I'm exaggerating. But I mean, there were an awful lot of precincts where a scanner had broken down during the course of the day. And somebody had to get out there. Now, that doesn't mean it was put out of commission and we had to get another one or whatnot. Those were more extreme situations. But I think Margaret could probably tell you, I don't know, I haven't asked her, but in terms of our rovers and the people that handle that sort of thing, they must have been really busy all day long going to fix these kind of things.
Well, there was that, there was a lot of conversations going on here in the Help Center, trying to get the scanners unjammed. That was the big issue, the jamming.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my observations, basically, I think the observations so far have been excellent. I just want to remind the public and everybody that we had, I know for the county executive race, I think we had over 400,000 votes cast. And I've been told in the past that we're bigger than 6 states, but I haven't confirmed that. But Phil Andrews has always told me that. And I just want to remind the public that we are bigger than many, many states, not counties, states in the United States. And for the problems we've had, I give Margaret and the staff an A. Can't give you an A+. I'll give you an A for the work we've done and for the efforts we've had.
Not A+?
Okay, A+. No, A. Because I want to remind everybody that you look around the country and all the issues they've had, allegations of fraud and lost ballots and found ballots. Kudos to Margaret and the staff for having such a clean, efficient election. And I don't want anybody to forget that. There's got to be problems. We have over 1 million residents. And we have problems, a sign here, this here, that there, and we want to correct all of it. But a reminder that I think this election was excellent. And you look around the country, and I think we stand out as well as any election outfit in the United States. My observations focus on scanners. I think that's the root of any major issues we have. I agree with everybody at this table. We should have, I'd love to see 3 scanners at everywhere. The more the better. So I think the scanning issue is number 1, to get more scanners. And we can take Mike up on meeting with our new county executive and council to get more scanners. The second issue, I think, is a major problem in terms of a problem that affects most voters, is parking. And there's no reason to change early voting sites if they're successful, but we got to work on the parking. That's very important. People they're at work and they say, I'll be back in 45 minutes, I'm going to vote. So efficiency is important to voters, that they want to get there, vote, and leave. And so I think parking is an issue. And I'm impressed with the troubleshooting that Margaret and the staff has done. When we had trouble in Place A, we redeployed people and equipment. So I think our election day troubleshooting is excellent, and let's keep that going. I saw Margaret and staff. We had a problem in Place A. They took resources from Place B. So I think that's important to maintain.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Question, when you were talking about parking, did you mean at early voting centers or at election day polling places?
Well, Potomac was always a problem. And other places, to me, scanners, parking are my priorities 1 and 2.
Not for general election, though. Early.
Well, we had problems
at early voting. Is that where you?
How does the executive office building in terms of parking now? It's really resolved itself.
Free parking, yes, and plenty handicap.
And in terms of voters coming up to me and suggestions, and Alan has a lot of, we all got suggestions. The main thing I hear from voters, they would love to see, after they vote, like who they voted for. Like get a receipt or see on the screen that here's who I voted for. For some reason, I keep hearing that more than anything from voters. That after it says goodbye, it's like, well,
I think you have to get rid of the walking around money.
But of all the things I've heard, people say, gee, I'd like to see like a receipt or on the screen, here's who you voted for. But
I guess that might create some issues with secret ballot and people,
I don't know. I just keep
information
hearing
being
that
out
a
there.
lot.
I don't know.
But other than that, and the observations, Alan and David, we should all give these suggestions to staff.
Alan did give us his
good.
suggestions.
But overall, scanners, parking are the main issues. I think the scanning issue would resolve a lot of the problems we've had.
On the parking, I mean, this is for Mike. Can they expand the parking at Potomac?
I think Potomac is a nightmare that I don't know how that can be worked. You have the parking that's there, that space is there, and it can't be expanded.
You can't create more parking places there.
It wouldn't be worth the nuclear war to try to go into the,
I was going to
to
say.
the woods or into the neighborhood.
Or tear out those
And you
tennis courts.
can't park out on the street. I mean, the street's too narrow.
But on behalf of the board,
I mean, the only, and I've discussed this with several people, the only resolution is to either to move it or put up with the parking as it is. Those are the two options.
and lastly, on behalf of the board, the duplication process we go through with the canvases is really something that hopefully we can do something about to alleviate the duplication by staff and the board. It seems like such a wasted effort of all the talent that we have.
Just for the record, we received a message from Mayo that they were having a meeting in December. So the first thing I did was call David, who's the president, and tell him that I would like to discuss again the possibility of having absentee ballots, because I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle for the duplication, but to allow us to open them up and start processing them earlier. And then I also asked, and I called Alicia and I said, how does Prince George feel about duplicating ballots? And I mean, their board was not very happy with it either. So.
Well, yeah, and I spoke to Rob McGinley, and he said that he thought their board would be interested in joining Montgomery County to bring to the forefront how much time and effort is being spent duplicating all these ballots that are being delivered via web delivery.
Yeah, I told a number of people we're certifying the election today, and I said, 3 weeks later?
Oh, I know. My daughter said to me, Mom, this is when, last Saturday I was going, and she said, Mom, Florida's finished the recount. And they're still, but on the duplication, do we know, is there a machine that would take the, that we just haven't purchased it or whatnot?
No, there's no machine.
There's nothing currently.
There's certification issues. That's what it comes down to. Certification to be able to take that information, and if I'm sure Jessica could step in here and talk about it, and I'm not really sure since I was told to have a short meeting.
Yeah,
but we would be happy to discuss it in the future, but I think the first big step is with regards to these duplicating ballots is to allow, if we're stuck with them, which I think we are, to allow us to start processing them earlier, and then federal certification of the ability to scan that equipment. There's a couple different ways to go.
But there's no reason why this web delivery cannot be limited to military and overseas
diplomatic
disabled voters
I think you can't get the genie back in the bottle.
It's hard to
I
take
mean,
away.
that becomes a voter suppression
Well,
issue,
we
really.
have to have a discussion about this because
will.
people have got to understand this is the most insane process that I've ever seen for duplication, and there is a tremendous cost. And it's not suppression when you found out that you tried something and it's not working because we don't have the technology right now to be able to scan those 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper.
But Marianne makes a good point. You know, when you have an ability to vote a certain way,
Yeah,
it's
you
hard to
can't-
take it away. You know what I'm saying? That's it.
But they did. They've done it. They did it for one election cycle.
Yeah, they did.
They offered it, it was available to everyone
2010?
in 2010, and in 2012, they limited it to military and overseas
Oh, I didn't know-
voters and
oh, I didn't know
disabled
that.
voters. And there was no outcry.
But that's when it was instituted,
Sure.
right?
Right.
That's when it got instituted at that level, and then it expanded.
I have to go back and look. I don't think that's the case. I think there-
2012, though, we also had the hurricane, and that's where the expansion went crazy.
No, but I agree with Alex. It's
Maybe. I'll have to
okay.
look at that and look.
I mean, we can still let people request their ballot online, but have it mailed to them and have, I don't know any other way to do it because this is just creating a tremendous burden that nobody anticipated.
Certainly it's for discussion.
And Mary Ann's point is right. I mean, there's got to be somebody who's invented a machine in this country that we can
Just scan the
scan
web
the
ballots.
8.5 by 11. But if that's not possible, I think we really need to look at limiting it again. And as Kevin points out, there's a precedent for that in the past. And let's just clearly explain it to people. That we just can't have 200 people in a room taking 10 days to duplicate all these ballots. It's just too much. We don't have enough.
Nahid?
David was talking about the storage that become a big problem. The storage of those people that are working outside. This lady from the party which Alan belonged was middle of voting place between booth and the scanner, demanding we tell them where to park, where to store all those things. And I told the people, everybody was looking what they do, they were frustrated. I told them, tell her get out, go wait in the hallway, then somebody go talk to them. And another one was, we were 8 o'clock, everybody closing, we were doing that. She demanded we give her permission to store. I said, the election is over. Take your belonging and go home. So they keep pointing to your email. And the chief judge didn't know anything about it. The floor manager didn't know anything about it.
Well,
I didn't know anything about it, where to store them.
But that's because the message was not intended for you. It was for the political campaigns to contact the facility manager and find out where they may store stuff. If they were allowed to store anything. At Boer Park, they were not allowed to store.
They didn't follow the rule. They were right middle of the voting
And
place
that's why the
demanding to store their belongings.
And that's
one
why the
thing.
county is taking the position they
So,
are.
EOB shouldn't happen if I'm there. Alan, talking about the 723, the reason they had 1.5 hour long wait because one of the scanner was down. They only have one scanner, and they did not enough manpower. It was the students that were doing the check-in, and one lady was sitting by the door. I don't know what her role was. When I told her, she just said, "Oh, I cannot tell her what to do." And that was the problem. And some of those people which they give the paper ballot, they go on and on and on. So you should tell them limited and go right to the point. Don't go line by line and read it for them. They are educated. They know what to do. First of all, ask them, have you done this before? If they say, oh yes, I have done it many times, I mean they know what to do. Don't make it shorter. That will help.
You mean
them.
at the ballot table? You mean
Ballot
what you're talking
table,
about,
yes,
the explanations?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was too long. The rest of the thing, wherever I went, there were churches. I guess God was looking after them, no problem. And some other places, if it was a problem, we solved the problem. I mean, it wasn't that. But this storage business was really a headache.
Thank you.
No.
Alex?
Well, I've already talked about ballot duplication and my issues there. I just want to say overall, I was, as I have been since I've been on this board, I was very impressed with the organization that staff and the time they put into and the forethought You go into every one of these places. There's a binder for this, an instruction sheet for this, a checklist for that. It's so well laid out. It's like a military operation. It's pretty impressive. And so I want to say overall, I think it was an excellent job. What I noticed, I think, on Election Day was just the, kind of the surprise turnout. I mean, a number of places I went to had 50 people in line at 7 o'clock. Some of them had 200 people voted by 8 or 8:30, which was, I don't know that anybody could have predicted that. But I think in all, every place that I visited dealt with the backup very well, and it didn't seem to put anybody off, that I could tell. Early voting centers, I think, again, I only had my experience at St. Catherine's over the weekend, but I think voting on Saturday and Sunday is probably a good bet for most people because there's usually not any kind of a backup on the weekends, at least that I've ever seen. In general, I think the reaction time for when scanners were experiencing problems or went down, I think people really jumped into action quickly and tried and mostly succeeded in getting the problems resolved. So there was a very good system in place for reporting problems and then having the logistical coordination to get somebody out there to get it solved. So those are my observations. Generally positive.
Thanks, Evan. Kevin?
I'm not going to rehash what's already been covered, but I do want to thank the staff for doing a tremendous job. As Jim pointed out, we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of voters. I'm shocked, quite frankly, about how little some people realize there is about voting. I had a doctor. Should maybe question my doctor, but certified doctor, and he tells me, he goes, I said, well, why didn't you vote early? He goes, early voting? I thought that was absentee voting. And then this is a guy who's, bright, went to Georgetown, board certified physician. So as much as you try and educate people, I think most people have such little understanding of the hard work that really goes into this process. And the staff does a tremendous, tremendous job. The one thing I will say that I have seen that I think has been a tremendous improvement is the canvas has been run very well. The auditing, the scanning, the ability to go through all this ridiculous duplication and be able to track a web delivery ballot that's number 37 out of 50, and be able to track that back and pare it back. I think the staff has worked very hard to make that a system where it's easy to audit, and they've done a very good job. So I thought the election went very well. As usual, as has always been the case, the staff worked countless hours to make sure that it was successful. And my congratulations to Margaret, but I know Margaret is the leader, but she has lots and lots of people that do a tremendous amount of work, voter registration and operations and everything else, and they all do a terrific job. And our voters really should appreciate the fine services they receive in Montgomery County, because I can assure you that the same experience is not occurring in other places.
Thank you, Kevin.
If I may,
Sure.
I'm sorry, because I was only focusing on the election, but I'd just like to pick up on Kevin's observation on the canvas, and it was spot on terrific, I thought, this year. I mean, it's always an incredibly difficult thing to manage, and sometimes are better than others, but I thought the canvas that operation this year went very, very well. Margaret really did.
Well, I want to thank you for those accolades. As I always say, it's a team effort, and I will tell you that I sit down with Janet and Jessica White and Allison and Lolita and Michelle Gonda and Lisa Marino, and we talk and talk and talk to try to figure out how to do it very well. And it would not be the way it is without their important and valuable information, contributions. I'm smart enough to know what I'm not smart about, and I listen to what they have to say, and we adopt it to try to make it run as smoothly as humanly possible. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, is there any new business?
Yes, I have. There was quite a bit of email traffic over the weekend about 523, and so as I stated at that time, Allison and I did not have any time to talk to one another about the election except specific to the canvass and audit until Friday night at 7 o'clock. And we were sitting here, so we didn't even have a drink. So we were trying to talk through the issues surrounding 523 and precincts like that. So one of the things that I did was have put together for you, and we can certainly talk at some point in the future, about where East County votes. And there's another document in here that shows you in precinct 523, we had 216 provisional voters. Really and truly, we should have only had 23. Okay? Instead, we had all of these other individuals voting. Now, admittedly, precinct 523 had a real barn burner of a provisional voters at this precinct because of the draw. But if you look at these precincts that the people should have went to, and you look, which is on the back side, we had poll books closing starting at 8:03, and of course, provisional voters. 523 was our latest one. White Oak Middle School was at 9:30. So, if individuals in East County were to go to their correct polling place, some of the 200 people that were, so it would have been 195 individuals plus, that ended up standing in line to vote a provisional ballot, and thus also serving as a kind of slowing the line for those legitimate 523 voters. But like I said in my email, we're only beginning to look at this data. I can factually tell you that between 10 and 10:33, the second scanner was up and functioning. When Allison started looking at the poll book numbers, there wasn't a really good explanation as to why the poll workers were processing in such a slow manner. So we're going to keep looking at this. We're going to look at these other precincts that ended up getting what I call the early voting dump, such as the Silver Spring Library. But I will also tell you that when early voting was first instituted, and I believe it started out in Colorado and California and Washington State or Oregon, one of the things that they started to see as a trend was the popularity of these early vote centers or vote centers, and at the cost of the precinct polling place. And then when we did introduce early voting, we had candidates have rallies down at the Silver Spring Civic Center, encouraging everyone from Prince George's and Howard County to come and vote here. And we started to see an increasing number of out-of-county voters. It is a trend that we can expect to see. And so what I would just say to you is look forward to further explanation in January with regards to these precincts with the early voting issues.
Yeah, let's put that on the January agenda.
Okay. All right. right, thank you.
Margaret, how many early voting centers are also election day voting places?
I don't know that off the top of my head. At least a half a dozen.
Lisa?
Of the 11?
Just two?
Really?
So Margaret, on this chart, the blue numbers are for
The
each
number of,
precinct.
I didn't realize
the
that.
blue numbers are the number of people who voted provisionally from that precinct
Yeah, that's
at
interesting. Yeah.
Do you have more?
Kraisner.
It's in your
Oh,
folder.
meaning, this is a breakdown of the 216, I guess.
Yes.
So, for example, in 519, 39 people from 519 tried to vote at Kraisner.
Oh, they did vote at
Or
Kraisner.
did vote at Kraisner.
They did vote at Kraisner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had the
It's
10 from Prince
Right.
George's and other counties, and then the 9 from those precincts that were not in election district 5. So, I mean, if voters in those instances, you know, the claim that East County was being, you know, dissed or whatever, it just wasn't happening. Because if people had gone to the correct polling place, we would have seen, the numbers would have been different.
Well, and maybe is it a question that people just aren't knowledgeable enough to know about the process to know that early voting ends at a certain point and then you can't go back there? I don't know.
That's one of the things that Roberto and Allison and I did talk about is do we need to do a more substantial part of the sample ballot or a separate mailing so that there is a clear delineation? Or is it just as what I suggested, and we are going to have to move away from polling places and have these vote centers where anybody can show up anywhere and vote any ballot? I mean, that's where it's going. That's a question of, are you going to get ahead of the curve, or are you going to just, you know, try to continue to push people to these old-fashioned polling places?
Well, we're going to put 523
Yes,
on the January
yes.
agenda.
Do we have any data, I'm sorry that I missed the portion of this conversation, do we have any data on how this looks at other places that were early voting sites?
David, this was just the beginning, as I stated in the email.
Okay.
Do you have an idea about the average number of provisional ballots throughout the county?
I think it was like 18 or, no, it was more, it has to be higher than that. It's definitely
less.
under 40.
So it was about a 3% average provisional rate across the county, and there it was about almost 13%. And that was the most provisional ballots being fully placed on election day. We got Silver Spring by 45%. And I will say, David got a lot of voters to go to their proper polling place, so that's after his efforts, there's still that.
Yeah, we were working the line,
Thank
Jessica
you.
was as well, to try and get people to go.
Thank
and
you.
sometimes people didn't want to hear what we had to say because why were we trying to convince them to leave the line?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so
And if they had
Yeah.
gone to their correct polling place, look, the election judges were shutting down the poll books at 8 o'clock or a little after.
right. Yeah, that was actually part of convincing them was also, I had to say to them, this is the longest line in Montgomery County, because they were afraid they were going to go to another location and have another line,
Yeah, another line.
after they waited a long time. Do you happen to know how many of these are people who are voting the very same ballot, like the same ballot style? Because I know that was an issue as well. That, but there's definitely a lot of confusion.
Yeah, Margaret's going to bring us up to speed. I know Lisa's going to be devastated, but we're not going to meet in December, which is historically what we don't. Staff deserves a quiet holiday season. So our next meeting is January 28th. David?
Staff deserves a quiet holiday season, but also deserves our holiday wishes. And I was wondering,
Yes.
if we have any plans for any kind of staff recognition event or anything along those lines.
They're going to be away.
Not for the holiday necessarily, but
we will
early
discuss
next
that.
year. Or I just think that they definitely are worthy of our recognition, whatever season it is.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Happy holidays. We'll be in touch.